Hi team. Today we are giving a presentation on the automated subdomain takeover by and also detecting the subdomain takeovers and how we can prevent them. And we are submitting this to our professor, uh, Dr. Reshmi Mitra, and we are a team of three: me, Nikita, and Srikant. And subdomain takeover is a now it's a very big issue, and we are getting very big bounties through the subdomain takeover. So we want to do some research on this, and this is our presentation. Yeah, Nikita, you can go ahead.
Cybersecurity has developed as a significant research subject due to the rapid progress of the cyber intelligence and network technology. However, due to the lack of adequate securities and DNS misconfigurations, the assigned external service such as cloud platform, e-commerce, content delivery service may assume control of the subdomain, creating a number of high severity risks. For example, when business submits their domain or subdomain DNS entries to the third party, such as a record or CNAME records, they fail to claim the ownership of the subdomain or delete the DNS configuration. So, by registering an account on the same external service, an attacker might claim or take control of the subdomain, creating severe security concerns. Moreover, the SSL certificate is used to distinguish between the phishing website and the original website, but there is an attack called subdomain takeover that can entirely bypass the SSL certificate inspection and have a direct impact on the business. Next slide. Uh, the the CNAME, NS, and MX records are frequently used in the subdomain takeovers. The CNAME record attack is the most common one, while the NS and the MX are not so common. Uh, the present method for detecting these potential vulnerabilities is broken down into three stages. The first one is querying the subdomain, and the second is resolving and discovering the related records such as CNAME, NS, and MX. And finally, the third one is detecting the usability of destination domain. Um Next slide. The third slide is about what the subdomain takeover attack is and how does it happens. In step one, in order to sorry, in order to access the targeted website, that is abc.com, a user will send a DNS query to the DNS resolver requesting the IP address of the abc.com. Then at step two, the DNS resolver requests the IP address of abc.com from its DNS server. In step three, the CNAME record is primarily configured at a DNS server of abc.com, and it is pointed to another domain.com. Thus, this DNS server will return a message that says the targeted website has a CNAME record to another domain.com. Subsequently, in step 4, the DNS resolver will send another query package to the DNS server of another domain.com asking for the IP address. At step 5, a record is found regarding the required website of another domain.com. For example, say it's 1111. This IP address will be then returned to the DNS resolver. At step 6, the DNS resolver will respond this IP address, which is 1111, to the previous user. And finally, at step 7, the user will establish the connection to the web server of another domain.com using the same IP address, that's 1111. During this process, the user abc.com, the user requests abc.com rather than another domain.com, as the browser is not aware that the another domain.com even exists. Even though the CNAME record is used, the URL bar in the browser will still display abc.com. It's done.
Yeah, thank you, Nikita. So that I'll be taking over for the subdomain takeover. Here we can see the user DNS resolver and a DNS server, which will be needed for the connection. So, but in this case, subdomain takeover, we will be having another attacker server for the attacker, so that he cannot be able to go to the DNS resolver for the connection. In between, there will be a attacker server, which in place for the uh, attacker to get loss of the connections, and this will be used to configure to the point to the server. Mm. These DNS server of another domain will return the IP address to 2.2.2 to the DNS resolver. Finally, the DNS resolver will deliver its IP address to the user. Then they establish the connection to the attacker server, which is IP address 2.2.2 rather than the previous server, which means the subdomain which we used here in the 2.2.2 is the main subdomain, so that the attacker for the attacker server, and which will be fully controlled by the attacker who purchased the another domain, as the CNAME record has not been updated from the DNS server of abc.com until the record is deleted, so that we can be able to see in this picture the user, DNS resolver, and DNS server, which will be available for any other connections. But in this case, subdomain takeover, we will be seeing that attacker server in place of web server. And in the next slide, we will just a second. Now, in the next slide, we can see that the subdomain gatherings, which are sorry, connection. Yeah, querying subdomain through search engines, discovered subdomain through brute force, HTML source code, permutation scanning, DNS lookup, zone transfer. These are the gatherings for the subdomain, so that we can be able to get access to the source codes by HTML source code, and the permutation scanning are the most used in the subdomain takeover. And the tools which we'll be using for the enumerations are sublist 3 and subfinder. In all those, sublist 3 is an open source Python application that uses brute force techniques and data from publicly available sources to enumerate and aggregate subdomains of a specific website. It enumerates subdomains from a variety of popular search engines like Google, Bingo, Yahoo, Ask, and Baidu, as well as Resolved, DNS, Netcraft, DNS Dumpster, and Threadcard. It was also integrated with a DNS query spider program called Subroot, which used brute force and large words list to acquire new domains. Most in the enumerations tool, sublist 3 or is the most used one, and these are the various tools written in different languages to find subdomains, but the sublist 3 is the fastest tool. So, and next slides will be explained by the Sai.
Yeah, if generally we have a domain and we'll find all these subdomains, and now the next thing is you need to check whether the subdomain is vulnerable to the takeover or not. This is the procedure. This thing can be automated by using two steps. We can use sublister and get all the subdomains and save in a file and submit that file to the subg. Subg is an automation tool for the subdomain takeover. This will take all the subdomains and check whether they are vulnerable or not. uh, we can check this actually with a demo that can be more helpful. Okay, first, yeah, for example, in browser you'll be typing google.com and the request will go to Google. But generally how this works in Google is like, if you ping google.com, you'll be getting the IP address of the Google. This is the IP address of the Google. So through DNS, the internet works through DNS. Since humans can't enter the IP address, they have given the like some names to us, but actually underneath it everything goes through the DNS. So these hackers use this as a weapon, simply changing the C names of the C name pointing of the domain. They will just override. Like I will show you. So this is Sublister 3R. This is a Python tool which is used to find the subdomains. I will show you an example. S- I have opened, I have the Sublister running in my local. So I will be running a command. For example, in the Sublister we have a Python file, and we need to supply the domain. I am supplying sr secure.xyz. This is a domain. I am supplying this domain to the Sublister to find all the subdomains for this domain. See, now the Sublister is running. Now it will be scanning in the all the different search engines available in the market for the so generally people will be sorry. So generally what happens is, see, it is searching for the all the subdomains for the given domain. uh, when we browse some site, that site will be footprinted in the browsers. So from these it will find all the subdomains available. So these are all the subdomains available for the SR secure. See, this is the domain, right? See, this is the top level domain, and the whole thing, for example, this whole thing is called subdomain. Anil.srsecure.xyz is called subdomain. srsecure.xyz is called top level domain. So through top level domain, you will be finding all the subdomains for the given domain. Once you find them, you can save them in a file. Here I have already saved them in a file. Like, sorry. See, this is the subg master. This is the automation tool. This is the written in Golang. So if you want to run subg in your system, you need to install Golang, and we have the Go source file. To this, we need to give the domain names. Here I have all the domains, subdomains. So uh, so here I will be running one more command. You can see I am sending the target. I have kept all the subdomains in a text file and sending to the subg master so that it can find which are vulnerable and which are not vulnerable. You can see here it's clearly showing uh, which this if you see something like vulnerable here, this subdomain is vulnerable to the subdomain takeover. Like this, for our domain, for example, each company has a domain. Every day, like if they are running every day this subdomain takeover automation tool, they can find every day, like if any of their subdomain is vulnerable to the takeover. This is automated in the two steps. Just getting the subdomains to the file, and finding whether they are vulnerable or not. uh, and one more thing is, like, how can here generally this is the automation, but how generally it works is, they will just go to the site, and we have a website, can I take over xyz. Here it will be giving some fingerprints. So if you visit some site and if you see this website not found, then it is vulnerable to the subdomain takeover. Or if you see any of these fingerprints, it is available to the subdomain takeover. So this is the manual process, going to each website in the browser and checking, but this is automation. Subg is the automation to find the subdomains. uh, One more thing, this is the say, for example, in HackerOne we can see there are a lot of subdomain takeover bounties. Now subdomain takeover, many companies like Starbucks are giving huge bounties for these subdomain takeovers. So this is also, I mean, companies has considered this thing as a serious bug, because you are serving your own content over their subdomains. uh, Yeah. So finally, like in this, like we have discovered about the we have discussed about subdomain takeover, like how to discover subdomains and how to overtake them. Overtaking them is by just by changing the CNAME. CNAME is host to host. So by changing the, for example, if you need to if a subdomain is vulnerable, just create, if it's hosted in AWS, just create a S3 bucket with that name and just host some content. That's it. You are successfully take over the subdomain, and companies are paying huge amounts for the subdomain takeovers. So it's for preventing, the companies need to check their DNS records properly, and they should run the surveillance daily to escape from this. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Nikita, and thank you, Srikant.
Thank you, Sai.